Have you ever known someone whose mood seemed to swing from the lowest lows to the highest highs? Or a student whose explosive anger seems completely out of their control? In abnormal psychology, we use the DSM-5 to organize and understand these complex patterns. In this video, we're going to focus on conducting differential diagnosis, learning how to tell apart similarly sounding conditions in three major groups: disruptive or conduct, depressive, and bipolar disorders. The key lies in understanding the subtle but crucial differences in severity, duration, and context. This lecture assumes you are familiar with the different disorders and are focused in strengthening your skills in differentiation. If you aren't, feel free to read the book first before diving into this video as supplementary knowledge. Let's start with disruptive, impulse control, and conduct and related disorders. This group focuses on the inability to control emotions and behaviors, leading to actions that violate the rights of others or major societal norms. Let us differentiate between oppositional defiant disorder versus conduct disorder. Let us start by defining oppositional defiant disorder. The core feature is a persistent pattern of angry or irritable mood, argumentative or defiant behavior, and vindictiveness. This is primarily a problem with authority. The individual frequently argues, actively refuses to comply with rules, and deliberately annoys others. For example, a high schooler who constantly starts fights with their parents and teachers about rules, blames others for their failures, and is easily annoyed, but hasn't physically harmed anyone or committed serious theft. Now, let us compare the difference between oppositional defiant disorder and conduct disorder. Conduct disorder, or CD, is far more severe. CD is characterized by a persistent pattern of behaviors that violate the basic rights of others or major societal norms. If a student's behavior includes aggression to people or animals, destruction of property, deceitfulness, or serious rule violations, the diagnosis shifts from oppositional defiant disorder, or ODD, to CD. Now, let us differentiate between intermittent explosive disorder, or IED, versus conduct disorder, CD. Let us start by defining IED. This is defined by recurrent, impulsive, aggressive outbursts that are grossly disproportionate to the stressor. These outbursts are not typically premeditated or aimed at achieving some goal. In other words, it is not used as an instrument towards achieving an ends or a goal. For example, a person suddenly screams, throws objects, and punches a wall after a minor argument, and later feels intense regret. Now let us compare the difference between IED versus CD. The aggression in IED is impulsive and non-instrumental. In CD, however, aggression or destructive behavior is often planned, calculated, and aimed at achieving a goal. For example, intimidating a victim or stealing a car. So if the aggressive outbursts in IED are frequent enough and warrant separate clinical attention, the IED diagnosis may be given alongside CD. However, if only planned, calculated, and premeditated behavior is found, then only CD is diagnosed. Now let us briefly touch on the difference between CD versus antisocial personality disorder, or ASPD. In regards to ASPD, it is a personality disorder diagnosis, which is technically not under our current category. This is because ASPD is a stable, pervasive pattern, but it still shares similarities in CD, which could lead to confusion. The first similarity would be the shared disregard for and violation of the rights of others. These features include deceitfulness, impulsivity, irritability, and a profound lack of remorse. So what is the difference between the two? It comes down to age. CD is the diagnosis given to individuals under the age of 18 who display this pattern of severe rights-violating behavior. Meanwhile, ASPD can only be diagnosed when the person is age 18 or older and has a documented history of having met the criteria for CD before the age of 15. Now, finally, let's touch on the difference between pyromania and kleptomania to other conduct disorders. Defined, pyromania is about deliberate and purposeful fire setting on more than one occasion, driven by a profound fascination with fire and an overwhelming feeling of pleasure or relief when setting or witnessing fires. It is not done for profit, vengeance, or to cover up a crime. On the other hand, kleptomania involves the recurrent failure to resist impulses to steal objects that are not needed for personal use or monetary value. Similarly to pyromania, the person experiences intense tension before the act and immediate gratification or relief after the act. So what is the distinction? If fire setting or theft occurs as a part of a broader pervasive pattern of antisocial behavior that defines CD, which essentially means that the behavior isn't focused on simply setting fires or stealing alone, then CD is the primary, most comprehensive diagnosis. As mentioned, pyromania and kleptomania are diagnosed when the impulse control problem is narrowly focused on that specific act, aka setting fires or theft, and driven by internal tension and relief. Now let's move on to the depressive disorders. These disorders are characterized by the presence of sadness, emptiness, or irritable mood, often accompanied by physical and cognitive changes that significantly impact functioning. Let us begin by differentiating major depressive disorder, or MDD, versus persistent depressive disorder, or PDD. MDD requires a period of at least 2 weeks where the person experiences a persistent depressed mood or loss of interest or pleasure, which is also known as anhedonia, plus several other symptoms like sleep changes, fatigue, feelings of worthlessness, and so on. Meanwhile, PDD, also known as dysthymia, is the chronic form of MDD. This is because, while the symptoms are often milder than MDD, the key differentiation is the duration. The person must have been depressed most of the day, more days than not, for at least 2 years, or 1 year for children or adolescents, which is very different from the period of at least 2 weeks. And so, the difference between the two is that MDD is generally episodic, lasting 2 weeks minimum. Meanwhile, PDD is less severe but far more chronic, lasting 2 years minimum. It is important to note that a person can have both diagnoses. A full MDD episode on top of chronic PDD is sometimes called double depression. Now let us differentiate disruptive mood dysregulation disorder, or DMDD, versus other mood disorders such as MDD or bipolar disorders. Disruptive mood dysregulation disorder, or DMDD, is a disorder primarily affecting children with onset before age 10. It has 2 defining features: severe temper outbursts, which occur 3 or more times per week, and a persistent irritable or angry mood between outbursts. So what is the distinction from other depressive disorders? While all depressive disorders involve a certain level of irritability, DMDD's signature is the chronic inter-episode irritability and the frequency of the outbursts. This is different from the generally sad, withdrawn mood of MDD or PDD. And what about the distinction between bipolar disorders? This is a critical one. DMDD is chronic persistent irritability, while bipolar disorder is episodic, which means it is distinct, time-limited shifts between moods. It is also worth noting that a child who has ever met the criteria for a full manic or hypomanic episode cannot be diagnosed with DMDD. Now let's touch on premenstrual dysphoric disorder or PMDD. This involves severe mood swings, marked irritability, anxiety, and other depressive symptoms that occur specifically in the final week before menstruation and remit shortly after menses begins. So what is the distinction? PMDD is cyclical and biologically linked to the menstrual cycle, unlike the persistent nature of MDD or PDD. Lastly, in this section, let us go over external causes when it comes to these disorders. Substance or medication-induced depressive disorder and depressive disorder due to another medical condition are diagnosed when the symptoms are directly caused by drug use or withdrawal or a physical illness such as hypothyroidism. The core differential here is determining whether the depressive symptoms appeared before or after the medical substance factor. Now let's tackle differentiating bipolar and related disorders. These disorders involve dramatic shifts in mood between depressive episodes and periods of abnormally elevated, expansive, or irritable mood, which can be identified as mania or hypomania. Let us start by differentiating bipolar I disorder, or BP1, versus bipolar II disorder, or BP2. Let us first define BP1. The diagnostic requirement is at least one full manic episode. A manic episode is a period of elevated mood that is so severe it causes marked impairment in functioning or requires hospitalization. Depressive episodes are common, but not required for the BP1 diagnosis itself. Meanwhile, for bipolar II or BP2, the diagnostic requirement is at least one hypomanic episode and at least one full major depressive episode. Crucially, the person must never have had a full manic episode. So what is the difference? The key is the length and the hospitalization related to the elevated mood. BP1 is a longer state, having at least one manic episode, which lasts for 7 days or more, or requires hospitalization. BP2 is a shorter state, having a hypomanic episode at least once, and lasting at least 4 or more days, but less than 7 or more days, which, by definition, does not cause marked impairment or require hospitalization. Now let's touch on cyclothymic disorder. Cyclothymic disorder is a milder, more chronic mood fluctuation that involves numerous periods of hypomanic symptoms and numerous periods of depressive symptoms that are not severe or long enough to meet the full criteria for a major depressive episode or a hypomanic episode. So the distinction between cyclothymia versus something like bipolar II is that while both are chronic, bipolar II or BP2 involves full-blown episodes, such as depression or hypomania, while cyclothymia involves only subthreshold symptoms that persist for at least 2 years. Now, in regards to external causes, similar to depressive disorders, substance or medication-induced bipolar disorder and bipolar and related disorder due to another medical condition are diagnosed when the mania or hypomania is directly caused by an external factor. Finally, before we end, I want to touch on a bit on the specifiers of depressive and bipolar disorders. Specifiers are crucial descriptive features added to the main diagnosis to provide more clinical detail. Here are a common few that apply to both MDD and bipolar disorder. Usually, it is applied during a major depressive or manic episode. Anxious distress specifier. This specifier is used when a person is experiencing a mood episode, like depression or mania, but is also dealing with significant anxiety. This doesn't mean feeling a little nervous. It means having several noticeable, often distressing symptoms of anxiety, like feeling tense, restless, or being chronically worried about things. For example, imagine a person who is going through a major depressive episode. She's sad and tired, but also constantly feeling a knot in her stomach, is easily startled, and often wakes up with her mind immediately racing about all the things that could go wrong in her life. The next is mixed feature specifier. This specifier means that symptoms from the opposite mood pole are showing up during the current episode. This is when you have symptoms of both depression and mania, or the milder hypomania, at the same time, or very rapidly alternating within the same episode. For example, imagine someone who is currently in a deep depressive episode. He feels sad, worthless, and moves slowly. However, he also has a few signs of mania or hypomania. For example, he might suddenly have increased energy and feel agitated, pacing the floor, and talking very fast for a few hours. The next is the melancholic feature specifier. This describes a particularly severe and classic form of depression characterized by specific symptoms, the first of which is loss of pleasure or anhedonia. And for this specifier, it is a near total loss of pleasure. They literally feel nothing positive, even when doing things they used to love. Plus, they have an inability to be cheered up. If something great happens, their mood remains flat and heavy. They also have body symptoms. These are severe issues with basic bodily functions. This is known as vegetative symptoms. They also experience significant weight loss and a specific sleep disturbance called early morning awakening, where they wake up very early and are not able to fall back asleep. For example, imagine someone who loves to do their weekly jamming session. Now, even when playing his guitar, he feels absolutely no joy. On top of that, he wakes up consistently at 4 a.m. and can't go back to sleep, spending the rest of the night worrying. Finally, the seasonal pattern specifier. This specifier refers to the timing of mood episodes, requiring at least 2 episodes that consistently start and end at the same time of the year. This pattern means the mood episodes occur predictably at certain times of the year. It is often informally called seasonal affective disorder, or SAD. For example, someone notices that nearly every year around the middle of October, she starts feeling fatigued, sad, and oversleeping. These depressive symptoms consistently lift, and she feels normal again by late March. This regular timing is the seasonal pattern. And that is all for this video. You've just learned to navigate some of the most complex differential diagnoses in the DSM-5. We've seen how a diagnosis isn't just about sadness or anger, but about the intensity of the symptoms, their duration, their context, and the presence or absence of mania. Now that you have these tools, I have a challenge for you in the comments below. How would you approach the case of a college student who says they feel severely sad for 2 weeks every month, but then has 4 days where they feel incredibly creative and productive? Thank you for watching this video, and please like and subscribe for more deep dives in abnormal psychology. Thanks for watching. Bye bye!